This school resource officer in particular, you have already heard about before he came in. What do you mean you've heard things about him? What have you heard?
Oh, yes, sir. He's known as Officer Slam around our school. And I've heard he's, in the past, slammed pregnant women, teenage girls. He's known for slamming.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. The FBI is leading an investigation into the circumstances that led to a police officer's heavy use of force and arrest of a Spring Valley High School student in Columbia, South Carolina. Several videos of yesterday's incident, apparently taken on cell phones of other students in the classroom, created immediate and widespread outrage.
Hands behind your back. Give me your hands. Give me your hands. Give me your hands.
When this story broke last night, we also showed you this second video of the incident. The Justice Department's Civil Rights Division, the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office for South Carolina are conducting the civil rights probe into the case. Two people, including the student physically handled there by the officer, were arrested for a charge called disturbing schools. The other student arrested, a witness who tried to stand up for the student before being detained, will join me in just a moment. A third video shows another angle of the same incident. Sheriff Leon Lott of Richland County, who was attending a conference in Chicago on law enforcement, returned today and restated what authorities had already claimed, that the student refused to leave the class when both a teacher and administrator asked her to, and refused again when the school resource officer asked her to. The sheriff said he was disturbed by what he saw in those videos.
This is very disturbing. We've seen one video, we've seen two videos, and now we've learned that there's a third video. We have a third one that's come forward now. Another child or student in that class videoed it also from a different angle, and it shows a different perspective. It actually shows the student hitting the school resource officer with her fist and striking him. Now, what she does is not what I'm looking at. What I'm looking at is what our school resource officer did. What was his actions? What did he do? She disrupted class. She was disturbing the other students from getting their education. So she's in the wrong. But does her actions meet the level to what this officer did? That's what we're going to decide.
The sheriff's claim of the student striking the officer may refer to what she does with her arm involuntarily or voluntarily. It's very hard to say when the officer is flipping her over. The sheriff was asked about whether there might have been a racial component to the incident. He responded with this.
I don't know. It's difficult to say that. And I guess in one way I make that decision based on personal knowledge about this deputy. He's been dating an African-American female for quite some time now. You know, and so does that have a bearing on his thought process? You know, it may have. But I would think that would have it on a positive way and not on a negative way.
The officer in question, Ben Fields, is a deputy who is one of the two school resource officers at the high school. He's been placed on administrative duty. Officer Fields has been sued twice. One of those cases decided by a jury in his favor and upheld on appeal. Another case filed by a former Spring Valley student who was expelled in 2013 is set for a jury trial in January of next year. The lawsuit said Officer Fields unfairly and recklessly targets African-American students with allegations of gang membership and criminal gang activity. Fields denies any wrongdoing in that case as well. Today, the board of the Richland School District 2 condemned yesterday's act in the strongest terms.
There is absolutely no place in this district, or any other district for that matter, for what happened here yesterday. Our tolerance for it is zero. I repeat that what happened yesterday, what we all watched on that shamefully shocking video, is reprehensible, unforgivable, and inconsistent with everything that this district stands for, what we work for, and what we aspire to be.
The board has called for an investigation by South Carolina's Law Enforcement Division, or SLED, and says it will evaluate, reinforce, and strengthen training of school personnel on the appropriate use of school resource officers, and will refer this incident to their existing Diversity Task Force. According to Reuters, the school district's Black Parents Association has called for Justice Department probe into what it says are long-standing discriminatory practices by the school district itself. Joining me now, Spring Valley High School student Nia Kenny, who witnessed the incident and was arrested after standing up for the student in question. Also with me, her attorney, Todd Rutherford. Nia, thank you for joining me tonight. Can you give us a little perspective on what happened in that classroom before the videos all start?
Well, she was asked to leave the classroom, and she refused to leave the classroom. And our teacher then called an administrator in the class, and and she still refused to leave. And that's when Deputy Ben Fields was called in.
Could you tell us, was her infraction that she was, I had seen reports that she was looking at her phone, that was what attracted the attention of the teacher initially?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so she was looking at her phone. She wasn't like standing up and yelling or anything like that.
Not at all. She's a quiet girl. She doesn't do anything to anyone in the class, and it was really because she wouldn't give up her phone. And so our teacher, you know, tried to kick her out of the class.
The teacher tries to kick her out of class because she won't turn over her phone. He calls an administrator. She won't turn over her phone to the administrator or leave. Then that's when the police officer comes in, Mr. Fields. Is this something you've seen before, that the school resource officer is called into a classroom situation like this?
Never have I ever seen anything like that.
Were you and other students surprised that it seemed to escalate to that point?
Maybe the other kids were, because they were younger, and this is like, they haven't been at Spring Valley this long, but I've heard about him, so I wasn't really surprised because I've heard so much about him. So before he came to class, I was actually telling them, take out your cameras because I feel like this is going to go downhill because I've heard so much about him.
This school resource officer in particular, you have already heard about before he came in. What do you mean you've heard things about him? What have you heard?
Oh, yes, sir. He's known as Officer Slam around our school. And I've heard he's in the past slammed pregnant women, teenage girls. He's known for slamming.
One of the things that is so striking in this video is the other students in the class seem very quiet and scared and contained. No one seems to be intervening. Why do you think that was?
They were scared. They were scared. I was scared myself, but more than likely they were scared. I feel like the two grown men in the class were also scared themselves, because who's ever seen anything like that? That's not normal for someone to be handled like that, let alone a 16-year-old girl by a 300-pound man.
You at one point did get up, right, to say, I mean, what did you say? What happened?
I was screaming, crying, like, are you guys seriously letting this happen? Like, this is not right. You guys know this isn't right. And you guys are really letting this happen right now. And I guess maybe they were in shock, but still, so I feel like somebody in the class should have helped her.
Did the teacher or the administrator who were in the class, did they say anything or to the officer say, hey, this is excessive, or try to intercede in any way?
Not at all. They were both quiet, just like the kids.
So everyone's sitting there in stunned silence watching this happen. You then start saying something. What happens next?
And then the administrator, Karan Webb, who was also in the class, starts telling me, sit down, Nia, be quiet, Nia, put your phone away, Nia. And I'm just like, no, like, this is not right. This is not right. I can't believe y'all are doing this to her.
And then you are eventually arrested.
Yes, sir.
Who arrests you? Is it Officer Fields?
Yes, sir, it was.
So does he cuff you?
Yes, sir.
He cuffed you in your class?
Yes, sir, in the front of the classroom.
Mr. Rutherford, your client is now facing criminal charges. Am I understanding this correctly?
You are, and all she did was an heroic act and try and stop this monster from brutalizing this child. You know, it's been said before, and I was at the Waffle House before I came over here, listening to just people dialogue about this, and one of their concerns was that when an adult, a teacher, an administrator, ask a student to do something, that student should immediately do it. And while we don't question that, there is no doubt that no one, no human being, no animal should be treated the way that she was treated. Shakara was taken by her neck, and in doing so, as soon as the officer grabbed her neck, you see her react to what the sheriff says. She laid punches on the deputy, which is just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. She was then tossed across the room. So far, I might add, that when she was tossed, the deputy had to walk over to where she landed. He didn't just step. He threw her so far that he had to walk over to where she landed. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. And the fact that the sheriff is waiting to review the tape, that he is not outraged the way that every other citizen is just the most ridiculous thing, again, I've ever heard.
All right, Todd Rutherford and Nia Kenny. Nia, I want to just thank you very much for coming on tonight and being so clear and poised. It's really impressive. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, joining me now, Reddit Hudson, former St. Louis police officer, co-founder of National Coalition of Law Enforcement Officers for Justice, Reform and Accountability, and Kimberly Crenshaw. She's professor at law at UCLA and Columbia and co-founder of the African American Policy Forum. Kimberly, I feel like I need to process what I just heard.
I do too.
I don't know. It's sort of a remarkable. If there is a single small upside, it's that this. Is Nia saying this was not standard practice, that someone become running to the school, which is part of my thought?
And that's the only upside. And first, I have to say congratulations and thank you to Nia for actually standing up and telling the story and actually being a voice of reason in that moment, right? And we see the consequence of that is basically now she's in trouble too. You know, it's so outrageous what happened that it's difficult for us to also focus on the fact that charges are still pending against both of these young women. Now, that's telling us something about what the consequence is of having police in schools, right? You know, there's that saying, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If you're a police officer, everything looks like a crime. If you're a violent police officer, every moment of defiance, as you define it, is a justification for coercive force. And we're talking serious coercion at this moment.
Yeah, Reddit, I'd like your thoughts on that as a former police officer yourself. I've talked to a lot of cops over the last 2 years, and a lot of them say, look, sometimes you got to put hands on someone. This doesn't seem to me, from my amateur perspective, like an appropriate use of that.
Absolutely not. What you saw on that videotape was a senseless and brutal assault on a 16-year-old girl that's unjustifiable under the circumstances. Thank God for the awareness of the young lady who was just on and her classmates filming what happened so that we have an objective record of what took place. Without those videotapes, this officer is not on administrative leave, the Justice Department is not involved, and we're not where we are right now. Importantly, those video cameras and those officers who are now out in the national discourse talking about a Ferguson effect are really indicting the system itself, because what they're saying in effect is that now that you all can create objective records of our behavior consistently as we execute our public responsibilities, we can't do it anymore because we do so much dirt, we're afraid to work.
Let me ask you your response to the sheriff's comments today, and I want to get your thoughts too, Kimberly. But Reddit, the sheriff, his comments today after coming back from this conference that actually Barack Obama was speaking at the president today, particularly what he said when asked about whether it was racial, mentioning the personal life of the officer in question. What's your response?
My response is this. I would qualify his statement and say that racially, my problem would be with the amount of times this happens in communities of color to children of color in schools that are predominantly African American or Hispanic and Latino. He may be dating a black woman, I don't know, but I'll bet you he wouldn't have put his hands on a white 16-year-old girl the way that you saw him treat this young lady on that videotape. He slammed her forcefully to the ground and threw her across the room after he grabbed her around the throat. What's consistent, regardless of anyone's personal life, is in the execution of their public duties, the disproportionate use of excessive force and unnecessary force against people who don't deserve it.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that, while this is taking place in schools, that level of force, that kind of brutality that we're seeing in this video actually happens outside of schools as well. One of our recent reports, Say Her Name, looks at black women who have been manhandled and basically killed by precisely this kind of force. Tanisha Anderson, Cleveland, Ohio, she was killed days before Tamir Rice by police basically throwing her to to the ground and getting on top of her. Or Natasha McKenna was also killed by 6 white officers in hazmat uniforms with masks. Actually went to extract her from a cell. She was nude when she came out. She said, "You promised you wouldn't kill me." And they proceeded to body slam her and tasered her 4 times while she was handcuffed to a chair. So this kind of behavior towards black bodies we know about, but what we don't know about is it happens to black women as well. And we actually think that there's a gender and race component to that.
All right, Reddit Hudson and Kimberly Crenshaw, thank you for both very much. Really appreciate it.
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.